Hello PEI. The Hello PEI producer, Mike Montague of Remax Charlottetown, for his research and for suggesting this topic. And to you, listening right now, whether you are a resident looking out at the Northumberland Strait, or maybe a policymaker drafting next year's budget.
Right, or even just an entrepreneur, or honestly, anyone insanely curious about how the gears of the world actually turn. Welcome to the deep dive.
Exactly. Because I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine holding the keys to the future of global energy security.
It's a massive thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
Like, imagine having the sheer physical capability to keep the lights on in Massachusetts,
Okay.
to keep the heavy industrial factories running in Germany, and at the same time completely revolutionizing how we build human shelter in North America.
Yeah, holding all of those cards. But then, ironically, your own country's national conversation still treats you like this, I don't know, this quaint, financially dependent vacation town.
Right. And that is the ultimate disconnect between reality and reputation. I mean, for decades, the Maritimes have been boxed into this incredibly specific, frankly, kind of patronizing narrative.
Oh, absolutely. The classic have-not region.
Yeah, the beautiful ocean playground. You know, you visit in August to eat lobster,
Mm-hmm.
but economically.
Economically, the story we're constantly told is one of a passive dependent, heavily reliant on federal equalization transfers just to keep the lights on.
Just to balance the provincial books, yeah. And that narrative is so deeply entrenched in the Canadian identity, we almost accept it as a law of physics.
Right, like the financial engines are in central Canada, the resource engines are out west, and the East Coast is just there.
Exactly. And that ingrained myth is exactly what we are tearing down today. Because when you actually look at the structural reality of 2026, that old narrative doesn't just look outdated.
No, it's fundamentally, mathematically, and geographically incorrect.
It really is. So today we are unpacking two pivotal, wildly eye-opening documents that crossed our desks. The first is a comprehensive strategy paper called the Atlantic Powerhouse Manifesto.
And the second is this deeply detailed, very data-heavy analysis titled Energy Sovereignty and Maritime Innovation.
Yeah, and we need to be clear, these aren't futuristic, pie-in-the-sky think pieces. These are tactical roadmaps based on concrete capital investments that are happening right now.
Right. The core thesis driving these documents is profound. The Maritimes are sitting on North America's most strategic, underutilized energy corridor.
Seamlessly paired with the country's most innovative potential for housing and infrastructure.
Exactly. When you interlock the pieces, so the legacy hydrocarbon infrastructure, the staggering renewable capacity, and this completely revolutionary approach to housing, you realize something huge.
What's that?
You realize that Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have the raw resources to completely flip their dynamic. We are talking about a shift from fiscal dependence to absolute, undeniable global leadership.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we want to understand the utopian green future, we really have to start by looking at the hard, cold reality of right now.
Yeah, the analysis refers to this as the security pillar, or refining our own.
Right. Because before we can even utter the words wind turbine or tidal power, we have to address the massive elephant in the room here in 2026.
The paradox of our traditional energy dependence.
Exactly. And it's a paradox we impartially need to look at. Why do we have to start there?
Because it's the necessary starting point. And honestly, it's often the most uncomfortable one for forward-looking strategists.
How so?
Well, it's incredibly tempting when mapping out a clean future to only talk about pristine green technologies. Just completely ignore the current hydrocarbon-based economy that runs 80% of the globe.
But you can't just ignore it.
No, you can't. You cannot fund a massive, multi-billion-dollar societal transition to green energy on good intentions. You need an economic bridge.
Right. You need immediate capital flow, you need geopolitical stability, and sovereign leverage.
Exactly. And right now, the paradox of the Canadian energy sector is genuinely staggering. By every metric proven reserves, extraction capability, technological know-how, Canada is a global energy superpower.
Yet, structurally and economically, we behave exactly like a captive customer.
We really do.
Break that down for me, because if I look at the news, we are pumping millions of barrels. How on earth are we a customer?
It comes down to the supply chain loop, or rather, the complete lack of one. We extract vast, staggering quantities of raw product, primarily out west.
Okay, so we have the raw product.
Yes, but because we lack the sovereign infrastructure to move and process all of it domestically, we export that raw, unrefined product mostly south to the United States.
And because they are our single major buyer, they buy it at a massive discount.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. We sell the raw ingredients for pennies on the dollar. Then, because our Eastern domestic markets aren't connected to our Western supply, we turn around and buy back refined, finished fuel.
Like gasoline, diesel, jet fuel.
Yes, from foreign global interests at absolute premium, volatile market prices.
It is the definition of shooting yourself in the foot. Let me put this in perspective for the listener, just to make it super clear. Imagine a massive, highly successful commercial farm.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Right, so they grow thousands of acres of the most nutrient-dense, incredible vegetables in the world. But instead of feeding their own farm hands and local community, they load all those raw, unwashed vegetables onto a truck.
And ship them away.
Yeah, they ship them to a factory in another country at wholesale bargain basement prices. Then, those exact same farm workers drive to a high-end luxury grocery store to buy imported, prepackaged salads.
Salads made from their own vegetables.
Exactly. But now marked up by 400%.
Yeah.
If we have the resources in the ground and we literally have the capacity to refine it, why are we acting as price takers?
And nowhere is this absurdity more visibly concentrated than right here in the Maritimes. Look at the Irving Refinery in St. John, New Brunswick.
Right, which as of right now, in 2026, is the largest, most capable oil refinery in all of Canada.
It's a world-class, massive industrial facility capable of processing over 320,000 barrels a day.
But what actually happens there?
Well, if you stand on the shores of the Bay of Fundy and look out at the St. John Harbor, what do you see? You see a steady, unrelenting stream of massive foreign oil tankers.
Bringing crude from where? The Middle East.
The Middle East, the North Sea, the U.S. Gulf Coast, all arriving to supply our Canadian refinery. Meanwhile, our own domestic supply remains largely landlocked or flows south.
So we are exposing everyday consumers to the volatile whims of global energy markets.
Completely. Markets dictated by overseas conflicts, shipping bottlenecks, and foreign cartels. And we do this when we have all the physical ingredients to be entirely self-sufficient.
So how does the manifesto propose we fix the farm? How do we stop buying back our own salad?
This is where the proposed national pipeline strategy comes into play. It connects Western Canadian crude directly to the St. John refinery.
And we need to look at this impartially, strictly through the lens of the data provided in these documents, because it's a controversial topic.
Very controversial, but the test is very clear. This pipeline proposal isn't framed merely as a corporate oil expansion. It is explicitly outlined as a national security and prosperity strategy.
Because when you connect domestic supply directly to your own refining capacity, you alter the geopolitical vulnerability of the entire nation.
Exactly. You secure the baseline.
But a pipeline is just a tube. The refinery itself has to actually be able to handle what's coming out of that tube, right?
Yes, and that's a crucial point.
Because Western Canadian crude isn't the same as the light stuff coming off a ship from the North Sea.
That is a brilliant point, and it's where the engineering reality meets the policy. You are entirely correct. Western Canadian crude, particularly from the oil sands, is heavy.
It's thick, right?
Very viscous. It has longer, more complex hydrocarbon chains and higher sulfur content than the light sweet crude the Irving Refinery historically imports.
So you can't just pour heavy crude into a machine calibrated for light crude and expect gasoline to come out.
No, it would gum up the entire multi-billion-dollar apparatus. It just wouldn't work.
So how are they solving that? I mean, structurally.
The deep dive sources highlight a very specific strategic move. The Irving Oil 2025 Modernization Report.
Okay, what's in that report?
It details a $100 million capital investment specifically designed to modernize their FCCU.
The FCC, what does that stand for?
The Fluid Catalytic Cracking Unit.
Okay, wow, that sounds intense. What does it actually do?
To understand why this is a game changer, we have to look at the chemistry of refining. The FCCU is essentially the roaring heart of a modern refinery.
The heart, okay, got it.
When you get that heavy, dense crude, it's full of large, heavy hydrocarbon molecules. Those are essentially useless for running a modern car or a jet engine.
Right, you need lighter fuel.
Exactly. So the FCCU takes those heavy gas oils, heats them to extreme temperatures, upwards of 500 degrees Celsius.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly hot.
Yeah, and then it introduces a fine, powdery chemical catalyst. This environment literally cracks the long carbon chains apart.
Literally snapping them.
Snapping them into the shorter, lighter, highly valuable molecules that make up gasoline and diesel.
So by modernizing the FCCU metallurgy, the catalyst systems, and the thermal capacity, Irving is fundamentally changing the mechanical digestive system of the refinery.
That's a great way to put it. They're preparing the physical infrastructure to process our own heavier national resources efficiently.
Okay, that is fascinating. So the physical chess pieces on the board are actually moving. This isn't just a political talking point during an election cycle.
No, they are actively changing the chemistry of the refinery.
But let's bring this back down to the ground. What does that highly technical $100 million investment actually mean for the person listening to us right now?
You mean the person driving their car to work in Charlottetown or Halifax?
Yeah, exactly. What is the tangible impact for them?
The structural implications ripple through the entire economy. First, by closing that energy loop, you stabilize fuel prices for the Maritimes.
You fundamentally insulate the region from sudden global price spikes.
Precisely. If a conflict breaks out in a major global shipping lane or a canal is blocked, the maritime consumer isn't the one paying the penalty at the pump.
Because their fuel is sourced, transported, and refined domestically.
Right. Second, on an economic level, modernizing and running a facility of this complexity creates thousands of high-paying, highly technical jobs in New Brunswick.
We're talking about anchoring a whole generation of skilled trades, chemical engineers, and logistics experts in the region.
Exactly. And third, on a geopolitical level, it elevates the Maritimes into the role of the energy gatekeeper for Canada.
Instead of being the vulnerable end of the supply line.
Right. The region becomes the absolute anchor of national energy sovereignty.
Hold on, I have to push back here just to present the other side of the documents.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm looking at the calendar. It's 2026. The entire global conversation, every summit, every economic forum, every municipal town hall is about decarbonization.
It is. It's about net zero target.
Right, it's about getting off oil. So you're asking me and the listener to look at a massive multi-million-dollar fossil fuel infrastructure investment and see it as a progressive strategic win.
It does feel like intense cognitive dissonance, doesn't it?
Yeah. Break down the math for me. How does doubling down on a 20th century oil refinery directly fund a 21st century green energy transition? Aren't we just spinning our wheels in the past?
It's a completely valid tension to point out, and it's the exact skepticism the authors of the manifesto anticipate. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the strategy is very clear.
What's the strategy?
Leaders and policymakers must view this pipeline and the FCCU modernization not as the final destination, but as the transition bridge.
The transition bridge. Okay, explain that.
Here is the blunt economic reality outlined in the analysis. You cannot simply flip a switch and turn off the hydrocarbon economy overnight.
Because if you try, you don't get a green utopia.
No, you get catastrophic economic collapse, massive unemployment, and a total freeze in capital markets.
Yeah.
You have to actually fund the transition.
And the capital required to build the green infrastructure of tomorrow is astronomically expensive.
It is. The offshore wind platforms, the tidal arrays, the new smart grids, they cost billions.
So by securing our energy sovereignty now, we keep those revenues here.
Exactly. By keeping those billions of dollars of revenue within the Canadian economy rather than bleeding them out to foreign oil suppliers, the region secures the immediate capital it needs.
It secures the economic stability and the massive skilled labor force necessary to aggressively fund and build the green shift.
Right. It is the pragmatic, profit-generating economic engine of the present that actually pays for the utopian green future.
Okay, that makes perfect sense when you look at it impartially. It's the security of the now paying for the forever.
That's a good way to frame it.
You don't burn down your current house until the new one is built, and you use the equity in the old house to buy the lumber for the new one.
Precisely. That is the exact economic mechanism the manifesto is pushing for.
So let's look at that new house. Let's talk about the forever.
Alrighty.
Because if the Maritimes' traditional infrastructure makes it a national player, its natural geography is what makes it an absolute global heavyweight.
Which brings us to the second major theme of the analysis.
The Green Goliath. We've built the economic bridge with St. John. What exactly are we walking toward on the other side?
We are walking toward what the manifesto confidently calls the Saudi Arabia of wind and water.
The Saudi Arabia of wind and water. That sounds like massive hyperbole.
It does sound like hyperbole, but the data completely backs it up. The sheer scale of the natural, renewable, kinetic resources available in the Maritimes is staggering.
Okay, give me the hard numbers. Where are we getting this?
Let's look at the data from the Net Zero Atlantic 2026 report and the early 2026 Powering the Economy Act. These documents map out the technical potential for Nova Scotia offshore wind.
So they ran the meteorological data.
They did. They mapped the shallow water continental shelf, and the number they arrive at for harvestable wind energy is 434 gigawatts.
I need to stop you there, because 434 gigawatts is one of those numbers that is so massive it almost loses its meaning.
It's hard to visualize.
Yeah, our human brains aren't built to comprehend that. It just sounds like a sci-fi number.
It really does sound like science fiction, so let's ground it. Let's put 434 gigawatts into perspective. A single gigawatt can power roughly 750,000 modern homes.
Wait, one single gigawatt is 750,000 homes?
Yes, so 434 gigawatts is an unfathomable amount of energy.
What's the current demand for comparison?
The entire peak electricity demand for the province of Nova Scotia on the coldest, darkest winter day is roughly 2.2 gigawatts.
Are you serious? 2.2. So we have a potential that is literally hundreds of times greater than our maximum internal consumption.
Exactly. It is orders of magnitude more than what is needed to power the entire Atlantic region.
So what do we do with all that extra power?
Well, if even a fraction, a mere 5 or 10% of this technical potential is deployed, the Maritimes don't just become self-sufficient in clean electricity.
They become an exporter.
A massive, indispensable net exporter of baseline power to the highly populated, energy-hungry eastern seaboard.
The U.S. Northeast.
Yes. The analysis specifically notes that the U.S. Northeast, specifically Massachusetts, is already knocking on the door.
Because they have legally binding, incredibly aggressive climate targets.
Right. They are shutting down aging nuclear and coal plants, and they are desperate for clean power. So they are looking north.
But, and here is the classic argument against wind, the one you hear at every single municipal town hall meeting when a turbine is proposed wind, is intermittent.
Yes, the intermittency problem.
What happens when the wind isn't blowing? You can't run a modern society on power that takes a break.
You really can't.
You can't run hospital ventilators or massive data centers or an advanced manufacturing economy on energy that drops to zero when the weather is calm. Massachusetts isn't going to buy a power cord from us if the power cuts out every time there's a high-pressure system.
No, they wouldn't. You need baseload.
You need heavy, predictable, unyielding power.
And that, right there, is exactly where the Maritimes hold the ultimate trump card, the great equalizer.
Which is?
The Bay of Fundy. The tides in the Minas Passage move 14 billion tons of water.
14 billion.
14 billion tons of seawater. Twice a day. Every single day, inward and outward.
It doesn't depend on the weather.
It doesn't care if it's sunny or cloudy. It doesn't depend on the season or the climate. It's just gravity and the moon.
I want to paint a picture for the listener because we use analogies to make sense of this stuff.
Go for it.
Imagine the sheer physical force of every single commercial freight train on the planet Earth. Pack them all together and push them through a narrow, rocky gorge simultaneously.
That's a lot of mass.
I do it twice a day, on a schedule so precise you can set your atomic watch to it for the next 10,000 years. That is the kinetic energy of the Bay of Fundy.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and from a physics standpoint, it's vital to understand why tidal is so much more powerful than wind.
Why is that?
Because water is roughly 830 times denser than air.
Wow, 830 times.
Yeah. So a tidal turbine doesn't need to be nearly as massive as a wind turbine to generate the exact same amount of electricity. The medium pushing the blades is just incredibly dense.
It is the definition of predictable, unkillable marine energy.
Exactly. Unkillable. And we are finally seeing the serious capital flow into harnessing this beast.
The source documents highlight some specific investments, right?
Yes, they highlight the Natural Resources Canada $23 million investment in the Force Tidal project.
That's the Fundy Ocean Research Center for Energy.
Right, and they are also tracking new, highly advanced private ventures like Eau Claire Tidal.
What are they doing?
They are currently targeting 16.5 megawatts of capacity with next-generation turbine designs that can actually withstand that brutal underwater environment.
Because it is brutal down there. It tears equipment apart.
It does. But by combining the massive, albeit variable scale of offshore wind with the unyielding, mathematically predictable baseload of tidal power, the region transforms.
The Maritimes are positioning themselves as the world's leading R&D lab for marine renewables.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's look at the board again. We have this massive, mind-boggling energy surplus. We have the wind, we have the unkillable tide, we have electricity out the ears.
So much electricity.
But electricity is tricky, right? There's a massive logistical wall we hit here. It's not like oil.
No, it's
Like,
very different to transport.
you can't just easily pump raw electrons into a steel barrel, load it onto a cargo ship, and send it across the Atlantic to Europe. If Massachusetts is taking some over the power lines, great.
But transmission lines suffer from line loss over long distances.
Right. If we have hundreds of gigawatts of potential, how do we actually export this global advantage to the rest of the world? How is the region actually monetizing this wind and water on a global scale?
That brings us to the third core concept of the manifesto, the fuel of the future.
Okay, what is the fuel of the future?
The answer to the export problem, the way you essentially put a windstorm on a cargo ship, is green hydrogen and green ammonia.
Okay, break out the chemistry set for me. How does this work?
It starts with electrolysis. You take that massive surplus of clean, cheap electricity generated by the offshore wind and the Fundy tides, and you run it through water.
Just regular water.
Purified water, specifically. The electrical current literally breaks the chemical bonds of the water molecules.
Splitting the H2O.
Exactly, splitting it into oxygen and pure hydrogen gas. And because the electricity used to split the water came from a zero-carbon source like wind and tide, the resulting hydrogen is classified as green hydrogen.
It is a completely clean fuel.
Yes. When you burn it or use it in a fuel cell, the only byproduct is water vapor.
So you are basically turning wind and water into a combustible gas. That is incredible. But it solves the creation problem. Hydrogen is notoriously difficult to move, right?
It is. It's the lightest element in the universe.
This is where the physics of logistics comes in, I assume.
Exactly. Hydrogen has an incredibly high energy density by mass, meaning a kilogram of hydrogen holds a lot of energy.
But by volume.
It has a terrible energy density by volume. As a gas, it takes up a massive amount of space. So to put it on a ship, you have two choices.
Really?
You either have to chill it to minus 253 degrees Celsius to turn it into a liquid, which requires massive amounts of energy and specialized cryogenic tanks,
Oh, yeah.
or you compress it to extreme pressures, which risks embrittling the steel of the tanks.
So if it's that hard to ship, how do we get it to Europe?
You convert it into green ammonia.
Ammonia, like the cleaner.
Similar chemistry, yes.
Wow.
Ammonia is NH3, one nitrogen atom bonded to 3 hydrogen atoms. We take our green hydrogen and we bind it with nitrogen that we simply pull from the ambient air.
And ammonia is easier to ship.
Vastly easier to handle. It liquefies at a much warmer minus 33 degrees Celsius. Plus, we already have a massive global infrastructure for shipping ammonia.
Because it's used in fertilizers.
Exactly. So you ship the green ammonia across the ocean in standard chemical tankers.
And what happens when it gets to Europe?
Once it arrives, they can either burn the ammonia directly in modified industrial engines, or they can crack it back into pure hydrogen and nitrogen.
That is absolutely ingenious. You use the wind to make hydrogen, you pack the hydrogen into an ammonia suitcase, you ship the suitcase to Germany, and they unpack it to run their factories.
And the global market is desperate for this exact supply chain. The Nova Scotia Green Hydrogen Action Plan outlines this roadmap clearly.
We aren't just talking about small, localized pilot projects to show off at a science fair.
No, we are talking about massive nation-state level international commitments.
The analysis specifically highlights a 200 million euro commitment from Germany directly to Atlantic Canada.
Germany is an industrial powerhouse. They manufacture the world's cars, chemicals, and steel.
But they recognize that to decarbonize their heavy industry and their global shipping fleets, they can't rely on wind and solar alone within their own borders.
They just don't have the space or the wind profile. They need green hydrogen, and they're officially looking to the Maritimes to supply it.
They're looking to us to be their gas station.
Exactly. The region evolves from the quaint ocean playground to the green fuel station of the Atlantic.
We aren't just generating power to keep our own lights on.
No, we are literally manufacturing the physical liquid alternative fuel that will run global heavy industry in the 21st century.
What is so wild about this, and I really want you, the listener, to sit with this juxtaposition for a second, is the tension here.
Between traditional and green.
Yes. The tension between what is happening in St. John, New Brunswick, and what is happening in Nova Scotia.
It's quite the contrast.
On one hand, you have the Maritimes managing the absolute zenith, the absolute heights of traditional petroleum refining with the Irving facility's FCCU modernization.
They are optimizing the legacy energy system, cracking heavy crude, securing the domestic supply of fossil fuels to keep the current economy roaring.
And simultaneously, just a few hours drive next door, They are acting as the absolute global cutting edge for green hydrogen.
Taking hundreds of millions in European investment to build the zero-carbon fuel of the future. What's fascinating here is how incredibly rare it is for one geographical region to control both ends of the energy spectrum.
Usually on a global scale, it's one or the other, right?
Exactly. Usually you have regions that are deeply entrenched, legacy oil and gas producers who are fighting the green transition tooth and nail.
Because it threatens their core economy.
Right. And on the other side, you have separate emerging regions desperately trying to build the green economy from scratch.
But they lack the legacy capital and the heavy industrial know-how to scale it up.
The Maritimes have both. They are managing the sunset of the old energy paradigm and the dawn of the new one perfectly, simultaneously.
That tension, that dual identity,
Right.
is their ultimate strategic advantage.
It really is. It allows them to pace the transition, utilizing the wealth, the engineering talent, and the physical infrastructure of the present to flawlessly execute and fund the future.
It's brilliant. It's like having your feet planted firmly in two different centuries, pulling the absolute best from both.
But there's a catch.
There's always a catch. As this analysis so astutely points out, this massive industrial boom brings us crashing headfirst into a very real, very immediate crisis.
A very human crisis.
Right, because here's the reality. A booming green industry building massive hydrogen electrolysis facilities, deploying hundreds of offshore wind platforms in the Atlantic, manufacturing tidal turbines, requires a massive influx of labor.
And not just general labor. The documents specifically refer to a savant labor force.
A savant labor force. What does that mean?
We are talking about highly skilled, technically proficient mechanical engineers, specialized tradespeople, marine biologists, hydrogen technicians, and logistics experts.
We need thousands of them to migrate to the region to build this powerhouse.
And those workers need a place to live.
And right now, in 2026, across the entire country, but especially in the Maritimes, we are in the grip of a historic housing shortage.
You can have all the wind, all the water, and all the German capital in the world.
But if the engineers building the turbines are living in their cars or couch surfing because there is zero available housing, the whole powerhouse engine grinds to a devastating halt.
Energy is useless if you don't have housing. They are inextricably linked.
And this is exactly where Prince Edward Island enters the chat, stepping up to solve the crisis by proposing to become Canada's first special economic zone for housing technology.
The concept of the PEI housing SEZ is without a doubt the most radical and innovative structural proposal in the entire Atlantic Powerhouse Manifesto.
The SEZ, the Special Economic Zone. The idea is to turn Prince Edward Island into the ultimate testing ground.
A highly deregulated regulatory sandbox designed specifically to incentivize rapid construction and technological innovation.
Break down the mechanics of an SEZ for me, because special economic zone sounds like bureaucratic jargon. How does this actually alter the reality of building a house?
Essentially, an SEZ carves out a specific geographic area and applies a completely different set of economic and regulatory rules to it compared to the rest of the country.
Okay, so different rules for PEI.
In the context of the PEI housing SEZ, it means waiving massive tax burdens for companies that perform R&D on island.
It means suspending traditional antiquated zoning bylaws.
But the most crucial mechanism detailed in the analysis is the implementation of 15-day shotgun approvals for modular housing designs.
Here's where it gets really interesting. 15-day shotgun approvals. I want everyone listening, especially anyone who has ever tried to build a home or even just add an extension to their deck, to imagine this.
Imagine removing the labyrinth of municipal red tape.
Traditionally, getting permits to build a multi-unit housing structure can take years. Years of environmental reviews, zoning hearings, and endless back and forth with municipal clerks.
It's a nightmare for developers.
But the SEZ proposes that if you submit a standardized modular design, within 15 days you have the green light. The overarching motto of the zone is just build.
By removing the bureaucratic friction, PEI becomes a massive magnet for housing innovation and private capital.
It allows the physical construction industry to operate with the agility and speed of a Silicon Valley tech startup.
It does. Now, I anticipate your pushback here because the immediate question is always about safety.
Exactly. I'll ask it right now. Wait, if you approve a complex building in 15 days, how do you ensure the roof doesn't cave in under snow?
Right, that's the fear.
What happens to safety inspections? Are we just throwing the building code out the window to build fast? I mean, we were impartially looking at these documents, and that's a huge concern.
Absolutely not. The safety isn't compromised. The process is automated. The SEZ doesn't approve custom, bespoke, hand-drawn blueprints in 15 days.
Oh, okay. What does it approve?
It approves pre-certified, standardized, modular blueprints. These are designs that have already been rigorously tested in computational models.
So they know they are safe before they even submit the paperwork.
Exactly. And within this regulatory sandbox, the manifesto highlights a very specific initiative, the Construction Savant program.
Unpack the Savant program for us.
The Savant program is where the technology actually scales. It deeply integrates artificial intelligence, advanced robotics, and 3D concrete printing technologies into the physical build process.
Because we are facing a massive demographic cliff in the skilled trades right now.
We really are. Plumbers, electricians, and framers are retiring faster than we can train new ones.
The goal of the Savant program is to use AI-driven logistics and 3D printing to slash the need for manual labor by up to 50% in the structural phase.
Exactly. You have an AI mapping the electrical conduit paths perfectly before a single drop of concrete is poured.
And then a robotic gantry system extrudes the walls precisely to the millimeter.
Which is absolutely vital. If we have a skilled trades shortage and we need to build thousands of homes for the energy workers, you can't rely on guys with hammers.
You just can't. If you can use AI and physical robotics to do the heavy structural lifting, you can build twice as fast with half the human workforce without compromising safety.
But running a massive facility full of 3D concrete printers and high-tech automated mass timber factories, that requires a phenomenal amount of electricity.
It does. Running heavy robotics 24/7 is an energy-intensive nightmare.
And this is exactly where the genius of the interconnected maritime strategy reveals itself. This is where the puzzle pieces lock together.
How so?
The fundamental economic loop of the 21st century is simple. Cheap power equals cheap production.
The surplus from Nova Scotia.
Exactly. With the massive green energy surplus coming from the Nova Scotia offshore wind and the unkillable Fundy tide, electricity costs in the region plummet.
Running those massive, energy-hungry 3D concrete printers on PEI suddenly becomes incredibly cheap.
The island takes the energy surplus generated by its neighbors and utilizes it to manufacture housing at a fraction of the traditional cost.
So PEI isn't just solving its own local housing crisis. This isn't just about building a few quick subdivisions in Charlottetown or Summerside to house locals.
No, PEI scales up. It becomes the advanced manufacturing hub for the entire eastern seaboard.
It is a highly lucrative export model.
PEI essentially becomes the factory floor for the maritime boom. They manufacture these modular units to incredible specifications, specifically passive house certified units.
Explain the thermodynamics of a passive house for the listener.
A passive house is a building standard that creates a nearly airtight, hyper-insulated envelope. The thermodynamics are so efficient that the home requires almost zero external energy to heat or cool.
So it captures the heat generated by the sun through optimized windows.
Yes, and the heat from the appliances, and even the body heat of the occupants. It circulates all of that through an advanced heat recovery ventilator.
PEI builds these hyper-efficient units on island, inside massive climate-controlled factories, using cheap green power and automated robotics.
And then they ship them, literally trucking them across the Confederation Bridge or barging them across the strait over to Nova Scotia and New Brunswick.
To rapidly house the thousands of Savant workers migrating there to work in the wind farms, the hydrogen facilities, and the modernized refinery.
It's an incredible self-sustaining feedback loop.
It really is. The energy sector in Nova Scotia needs workers. PEI uses Nova Scotia's cheap energy to build the homes for those workers. The workers move in, build more energy infrastructure, which gives PEI more cheap power to build more homes.
And because PEI is a special economic zone, they get massive tax-free R&D incentives to develop what the analysis calls the homes of the future.
We are talking about jumping past the current baseline. The documents detail hydrogen-ready homes.
This is the ultimate synthesis of the Atlantic Powerhouse strategy. The vision laid out in these sources isn't just a basic box to sleep in.
No, we are talking about a PEI-built modular home that doesn't just passively consume electricity from the grid.
It features a built-in residential-scale hydrogen fuel cell for completely off-grid backup power, actively taking advantage of the region's new green hydrogen supply chain.
Or the home is digitally designed to seamlessly tie into a localized tidal microgrid, intelligently sharing its stored power with the neighborhood during peak demand hours.
The home itself ceases to be a mere shelter. It becomes an active, intelligent node in the region's energy ecosystem.
It is so incredibly forward-thinking. It's breathtaking when you see the whole board.
A huge vision.
But, and there was always a but when we talk about big visions. If you're listening to this, you're probably asking the same question I am.
What's stopping it?
Exactly. We have the energy blueprints. We know how to modernize a refinery. We know the wind and the tides are there. We have the German hydrogen capital.
We have the housing blueprints and the AI tech.
The innovation is there. The raw resources are there.
Yeah.
So what is stopping this from becoming reality tomorrow morning? Why aren't shovels in the ground right this second?
And that brings us to the final piece of our deep dive. The call to action wheels spinning and breaking down the silos.
Right. Because the greatest obstacle to realizing this Atlantic powerhouse vision isn't technological.
It isn't a lack of geographical resources, and it isn't a lack of capital. It is entirely bureaucratic.
The manifesto issues a very direct, unvarnished, almost aggressive message to the political leaders sitting in Ottawa and to the provincial capitals across the Maritimes.
The message is simple. Stop the silos. Stop treating these massive, intertwined societal challenges as isolated, separate files sitting on different ministers' desks.
Yes. I want to speak directly to any policymakers, ministers, or municipal leaders listening to us right now. The mathematical and economic argument these sources are making is utterly undeniable.
You cannot solve the housing crisis without addressing energy.
You cannot solve energy generation without massive physical infrastructure.
And you cannot solve the economy without technological innovation. They are not four different problems. They are the exact same problem, viewed from different angles.
If the Minister of Housing is not in daily, lockstep communication with the Minister of Energy, you are mathematically guaranteed to fail.
The perfect glaring example of this siloed thinking is the infrastructure missing link highlighted aggressively in the text.
The interties.
Yes. We have spent this deep dive talking about the massive 434 gigawatts of Nova Scotia offshore wind and the relentless Fundy tidal energy.
We talked about PEI needing that cheap green electricity to run its massive 3D concrete printers and become the housing manufacturing hub.
But all of that beautiful theoretical synergy means absolutely nothing if we don't invest in the physical transmission infrastructure to move that power from point A to point B.
If you don't build the extension cord, the appliance won't turn on. It's that simple.
We need to upgrade the high-voltage direct current lines, and we need secure, high-capacity, next-generation submarine cables connecting PEI to the mainland grid.
This raises an incredibly important question for our leadership at both the provincial and federal levels.
Are you willing to fund the unglamorous, unsexy, buried infrastructure that actually makes the visionary tech possible?
Everyone wants to cut the ribbon on a high-tech robotic housing factory, but no one wants to campaign on burying a submarine power cable.
But without the cable, the factory is just a very expensive, dark room.
Exactly, which is why the manifesto offers a clear, actionable pilot pitch to the government. Let PEI be the test bed.
Give them the special economic zone status. Allow them to suspend the red tape. Let them prove the model.
If the regulatory sandbox works for housing, if it successfully incentivizes rapid, high-tech modular construction using 15-day approvals, that exact same governance model can be applied elsewhere.
That exact same deregulation of red tape can be applied to fast-track energy infrastructure across the country.
The resources, the global capital, the cutting-edge technology, the wheels are spinning. They're spinning incredibly fast. Now, the government simply needs to provide the pavement so we can finally put those wheels on the road.
It's all right there for the taking.
So what does this all mean? We have taken quite a journey today, stepping out of the patronizing have-not shadow and looking at the raw mechanical truth of what this region is capable of.
We really have.
We started by looking at the hard reality of 2026, acknowledging that modernizing the Irving Refinery's FCCU and securing a domestic pipeline aren't the enemies of the green transition.
They are the vital, profit-generating economic bridge necessary to fund it.
We looked at the staggering world-class potential of 434 gigawatts of offshore wind and the mathematically unkillable kinetic force of 14 billion tons of tidal power rushing to the Bay of Fundy.
We saw how the Maritimes are leveraging advanced chemistry to turn that water and wind into green ammonia,
taking European capital to become the global fuel station for 21st century heavy industry, And finally, we saw how Prince Edward Island is perfectly positioned to leverage that exact cheap energy,
Operating as a special economic zone to become a massive automated housing factory.
utilizing AI, 15-day shotgun approvals, and 3D printing to house the very savant workers building this future.
The bottom line is abundantly clear. The Maritimes have the untapped, underutilized physical potential and resources to fundamentally shift global energy dynamics.
If this is properly and ambitiously tapped by leaders willing to break down the silos,
It is a profound shift in regional identity, from dependent to indispensable. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over, extending from the specific technologies we've discussed today.
okay, lay it on us.
We talked about PEI manufacturing and exporting these passive house modular units across the country. Homes that require almost zero energy to heat, possess their own hydrogen backup fuel cells, and are designed digitally to tie into localized microgrids.
Right.
Well, if PEI successfully scales this export model, and we see the deployment of hundreds of thousands of these hyper-efficient, self-sustaining units across Canada, could this housing model eventually flip the entire concept of the centralized national power grid on its head?
Oh, wow.
If every single home built in PEI's SEZ is essentially its own battery, its own generator, and its own energy node, are we not just building houses? Are we actively manufacturing millions of decentralized power plants?
That is wild.
PEI might not just solve the national housing crisis. They might accidentally engineer the complete obsolescence of the centralized energy grid as we know it.
That is an incredible thought to end on. Building homes that are actually power plants, quietly flipping the entire power dynamic of the country from the outside in. Thank you again to Hello PEI producer Mike Montague of RE/MAX Charlottetown for his research and for suggesting this topic.
It was a fantastic deep dive.
And to you, listening, wherever you are, keep questioning the narratives, keep looking at the underlying mechanics, and keep connecting the dots. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.